The moonlight bled through the broken stained glass, staining the corridor floor in watery patches of bruised violet and lead. My boots crunched on grit and dust that clung to the linoleum like dried blood. The dissonant piano notes scraped through the silence. Siskri, E, 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 E. Every 10 seconds, a rusty nail dragged across bone. Beneath it, the antique vacuum cleaner's low thrum gurgled from somewhere deep in the walls, a wet, persistent cough. My own breath fogged in the chill, each exhale a tiny fleeting ghost. The air tasted of decayed plaster and something metallic, like old blood on stone. My bones vibrated with the low thrum, a constant, insistent pulse beneath my skin. The sensory anomaly whispering from wrong room. 314. The door groaned, a sound like a dying thing. Inside, the air hung thick and still, smelling of mildew and the coppery tang of dried blood. The bed was a rusted frame, the sheet stained a dark, molten iron stain spreading from the center. My fingers traced the cold, cracked porcelain of the doll's cheek as I turned. It sat propped against the headboard, its glass eyes reflecting the watery moonlight with an unnerving clarity. I lifted my left hand palm up. The doll lifted its hand, palm up, a perfect echo. The neck creaked, a dry, brittle snap, as it turned to follow my movement. The dissonant piano note scraped again, scree, E, 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 then cut abruptly, leaving only the vacuum's gurgle and the frantic hammering of my own heart. The silence after the cut was worse, deeper. I took a step back. The doll's head tilted, mirroring the shift, its glass eyes now catching the light from the broken window. The reflection in those eyes wasn't T-mine. It was a distorted version, the features softened, blurred at the edges, like a watercolor left in the rain. My own eyes widened, the fear a cold stone in my throat. I tried to blink to break the reflection. The doll blinked slowly. Deliberately, its glass pupils seemed to 20-shift within the sockets. The bloodstain on the bed pulsed faintly in my peripheral vision, a dark, wet bloom against the stone. Gray sheets. The vibration in my bones intensified, a deep, resonant thritherum that traveled up my legs into my teeth. Into my teeth. It's not a doll, I thought, the words cold in my head. It's a mirror. A perfect, silent echo of my own fracture. Asterisk. I raised my right hand, fingers splayed. The doll raised its right hand. The neck creaked again, a dry, grinding sound like old bones twisting. The reflection in the glass eyes flickered. For a single, breathless second, the face in the reflection wasn't T-mine. It was hollowed out, the eyes sunken pits, the mouth a thin, tight line of pure vacancy, a vacant stare. The moonlight caught the doll's glass surface, and in that fractured reflection, I saw my own face twisted, the familiar lines erased, replaced by that terrifying, empty calm. The vacuum's gurgle seemed to deepen, filling the room, drowning the silence. The dissonant piano note never returned. Only the gurgle, the vibration, and the vacant stare reflected back at me from the doll's glass eyes. The cat moved first, a silent grey shadow detaching itself from the gloom. Its paws, unsettlingly large, left a shimmering trail of iridescent dust on the linoleum, a rainbow sheen that faded as quickly as it appeared. I followed, the vibration in my bones a constant, low thrum against the backdrop of the vacuum's persistent gurgle. The hallway stretched ahead, a labyrinth of peeling wallpaper patterned with faded roses, a mockery of beauty. Each step crunched on the grit that clung to the floor, a granular whisper against the oppressive silence. The piano note hadn't returned, but the anticipation of it hung heavy in the air, a coiled spring of dread. The cat paused before a door, its tail twitching, a metronome mocking the rhythm of my anxiety. It pushed against the warped wood with a surprising amount of force, the hinges groaning in protest, a drawn-out, mournful wail. I braced myself, the metallic taste in my mouth intensifying. The room beyond was a study, choked with the dust of decades. Rotting manuscripts lay scattered across a mahogany desk, their pages brittle and yellowed. The air was thicker here, heavier with the scent of decay and something else, something acrid like burnt sugar. The cat padded towards the desk, its oversized paws silent on the thick rug. It nudged at a small velvet box with its nose, a subtle invitation. I approached cautiously, my hand hovering over the box. The vibration in my bones intensified, syncing with an imagined rhythm, the phantom echo of the missing piano note. I opened the box. Inside, nestled on faded satin, lay a locket. It was oval-shaped, crafted from tarnished silver, intricately engraved with symbols I didn't recognize. I picked it up. It felt cold against my skin, heavier than it appeared. A faint vibration pulsed from within, a subtle tremor that resonated through my palm and up my arm. The vibration mirrored the feeling in my bones, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from somewhere within my very structure. The cat began to purr, a low rumble that amplified the locket's hum. The sound resonated within the room, intertwining with the vacuum's gurgle, creating a dissonant chorus. The locket sprang open, revealing its contents. A beetle perfectly preserved, encased in amber-colored resin. Its legs were curled, its antennae delicate and fragile. It pulsed with the same faint vibration as the locket itself. A wave of dizziness washed over me, the room tilting slightly. My skin prickled, a sensation like tiny digital cuts blooming across my arms and neck. I could almost feel the data flowing, the information flooding my senses. The cat's purr deepened, becoming a more insistent rumble. It pressed against my leg, its large paws kneading the fabric of my trousers. The vibration in the locket intensified, the frequency rising, merging with the phantom piano note into a single dissonant tone. It was a frequency that seemed to bypass my ears, resonating directly within my skull. The dust trails left by the cat shimmered more intensely, the iridescent colors swirling like an oil slick on water. My vision blurred. The room seemed to stretch and distort, the walls breathing, the shadows shifting. The scent of burnt sugar grew stronger, almost overwhelming. I felt a strange detachment, as if I were observing myself from a distance. The locket pulsed in my hand, the beetle within glowing with an eerie internal light. The cat's purr sharpened, morphing into a high-pitched whine that resonated deep within my bones, a piercing, insistent tone that threatened to shatter the fragile silence. The insect within the locket began to glow brighter, casting an unsettling light across the room. The locket's glow intensified, bathing the study in a sickly amber light. The vibration became a physical pressure, a tightening band around my skull. My breath hitched, a strangled rasp in my throat. The cat, a silent, gray engine of dread, turned and padded towards the far wall, its disproportionately large paws leaving shimmering trails of iridescent dust that clung to the air like captured starlight. It nudged at a section of wallpaper, a subtle pressure that seemed to manipulate the very fabric of the room. I followed, a marionette pulled by an unseen string. The wallpaper yielded, revealing a hidden doorway masked by years of neglect. The scent of burnt sugar thickened, almost choking. The vacuum's gurgle seemed to warp, stretching into a distorted drone that resonated with the locket's pulse. The vibration in my bones escalated, a frantic hammering against my ribs. The cat vanished through the opening. I hesitated, the metallic taste in my mouth intensifying. The doorway led to a narrow, twisting staircase that spiraled upwards into darkness. Each step groaned under my weight, a chorus of protest from ancient timbers. The air grew colder, laced with the metallic tang of rust and something else. Something alien. The stairs opened into an attic, a vast, cavernous space choked with shadows. Moonlight filtered through grimy windows, cast elongated, distorted shapes across the floor. The walls were smooth, stone gray, unlike anything I'd encountered in this house. They felt wrong, not the rough-hewn texture of aged plaster, but something cold and polished, like obsidian. Scattered across the floor were fragments of what looked like obsidian shards, reflecting the moonlight in fractured patterns, and tools bone, white tools of an unsettling geometry, their purpose utterly incomprehensible. The cat sat in the center of the room, bathed in a pool of moonlight. It was watching something. I followed its gaze. A scarecrow. It stood in the middle of the room, an anomaly of stitched fabric and twisted straw. But it wasn't just straw. Woven into its limbs were strands of human hair, dark and matted. The scent of molten iron permeated the air, emanating from the scarecrow like a physical presence. It tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement that sent a shiver crawling down my spine. Around it, swirling like smoke, were fragments of images, fleeting glimpses of faces, landscapes, moments I couldn't quite grasp. Stolen dreams. The piano note fractured. The sustained, mournful tone splintered into a jarring, metallic screech that resonated with the scarecrow's creaking joints. The vibration in my bones spiked, threatening to overwhelm me. My vision blurred, the edges of the room dissolving into a swirling vortex of gray and iron. A voice, not spoken, but tefelte, a cold intrusion into my mind. He remembers. I stumbled, my hand instinctively reaching for the locket. The beetle within pulsed with an almost painful intensity, its light reflecting in the scarecrow's blank, stitched face. A wave of dizziness washed over me, stronger this time. I saw my grandmother, her face pale and drawn, standing at the edge of a precipice. I heard her voice, a whisper lost to the wind. It's in your blood, Owen. The images intensified. A chaotic torrent of memories that weren't my own. A hospital room, a surgical table, a cold, sterile light, the scent of antiseptic, a feeling of profound loss. The vibration in the locket synced with the phantom memories, amplifying their emotional weight. The cat's purr sharpened, a high-pitched whine that drilled into my skull. It pressed against the scarecrow's leg, a silent offering. The obsidian walls seemed to breathe, the shadows deepening, coalescing into something more. The vacuum's gurgle faded, replaced by a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. And then, the scarecrow's eyes blinked, not the blank, stitched emptiness I had expected. Instead, staring back at me were eyes that were undeniably familiar. Wide, frightened, and filled with a profound, unsettling sadness. My own childhood face. The scarecrow's eyes, they held a reflection of me, a ghost of a boy I barely remembered. A wave of nausea churned in my gut, a bitter tang rising in my throat. The vibration in my bones resonated with the image, amplifying the unsettling familiarity. Win, my wide eyes. Stitched onto a burlap mask, I forced myself to move, to break the hypnotic gaze. The cat, a silent, grey predator, circled the scarecrow's feet, its disproportionately large paws leaving shimmering trails of iridescent dust. The dust clung to the stone-grey walls, highlighting faint carvings I hadn't noticed before. They weren't decorative, they were something else. I traced a finger across the cold, smooth surface. The carvings were intricate, a complex web of lines and symbols that felt strangely mathematical. Star charts, perhaps. Equations I didn't understand, yet felt a primal resonance with. As my finger moved, the symbols pulsed with a faint internal light, mirroring the rhythm of the persistent piano note that echoed in the cavernous space. We dissonant, sustained. It was a physical pressure against my temples, a counterpoint to the vibration in my bones. Memories, unwelcome and fragmented, began to surface. My grandfather, his voice a frantic whisper, railing against the hotel's hunger. My mother, lost in a silent, unresponsive world, her eyes vacant and unseeing. My grandmother, her face pale and drawn, muttering about a legacy, a burden passed down through generations. "It's in your blood, Owen." Owen, the words echoed in my mind, a chilling refrain. The cat emitted a low, guttural purr, a vibration that seemed to amplify the pulsing light of the symbols. The dust trails it left shifted, forming a path that led towards a ventilation shaft built into the wall. I hesitated. The symbols near the shaft were different. They weren't star charts, they were warnings. A single recurring glyph, a stylized representation of a parasite. Beneath it, a word I couldn't quite decipher, yet instinctively understood. Infestation. My breath hitched, a strangled rasp in the frigid air. The vibration in my bones spiked, a frantic hammering against my ribs. A wave of dizziness washed over me, blurring the edges of the room. I stumbled, bracing myself against the cold, obsidian-like wall. As I did, digital artifacts flickered across my skin, phantom bruises, shimmering scars, a grotesque map of my rising panic. The locket pulsed against my chest, its amber light reflecting in the scarecrow's unsettlingly familiar eyes. The piano note warped, stretching into a distorted drone that resonated with the walls themselves. The hum grew louder, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate within my very bones. I felt a pressure building behind my eyes, a sense of disorientation that threatened to overwhelm me. The air thickened, heavy with the metallic tang of rust and the faint scent of burnt sugar. I needed to understand. I needed to know what these symbols meant, what my family had been trying to warn me about. I took a tentative step towards the ventilation shaft, my hand instinctively reaching for the locket. The beetle within pulsed with an almost painful intensity. The cat watched, its yellow eyes gleaming in the dim moonlight. As I approached the shaft, the symbols began to glow crimson, bathing the room in an ominous red light. The vibration in my bones escalated, threatening to shatter my teeth. A wave of heat washed over me, followed by an intense chill. The piano note reached a fever pitch, a deafening crescendo that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. Then, with a grinding screech of metal, the ventilation shaft sealed shut behind me. The crimson light intensified, illuminating the carved symbols, now blazing with an almost unbearable intensity. I was trapped. The metal groaned like a dying beast, its ribs of rusted ductwork shuddering against my skull. The crimson light bled through the seams, staining the air with the scent of burnt sugar and something older. Something hungry. My fingers clawed at the jagged edges of the ventilation shaft's opening, the stone-grey walls slick beneath my palms. The vibrations in my bones had sharpened into a blade, each pulse of the locket's beetle carving into my ribs. Then, voices. not echoes, not memories. A leaving dive in. My grandfather's voice rough with static, his words warped into the duck's hollows. Fiend are not ghosts, Owen. They're there, a crackle, like a radio tuning between stations, a fiotel. The last syllable stretched, elongated into the hum of the antique vacuum cleaner, its motor whirring to life somewhere in the dark. The sound wasn't just in the air, it was inside in me, vibrating my teeth, my fillings ringing like struck chimes. The dissonant piano note fractured, splintering into a chorus of shattered glass, each shard a different pitch, a different memory. It's not a building. My grandmother's voice, breathless, urgent. The vacuum's hum deepened, morphing into the groan of shifting stone, the walls around me breathing. My skin prickled with static, the digital artifacts blooming across my arms like veins of liquid silver bleeding black. The locket pulsed, the beetle's wings a frantic blur behind the glass. Machine. The duck's walls sin-shifted, not metal, not stone. Something organic, something olive something a leaf levers, rippling like muscle beneath my fingertips. The cat's dust trails ahead glowed blue, pulsing in time with the vacuum's hum, the light refracting into jagged, crystalline shapes, symbols embedded in the walls. They writhed, rearranging themselves into constellations, equations dissolving into something far older than human mathematics. Fofi. They're not human, Owen. My mother's voice, flat, hollow, forcing. They were here first. The duct split open. I tumbled into a void of dim, watery moonlight, the foyer below a cavern of obsidian and molten iron. The vacuum's hum swelled, drowning out the whispers, its vibrations syncing with the rapid hammer of my pulse. The piano note changed higher, sharper, a scalpel's edge against my eardrums. The scarecrow stood motionless in the center of the space, its burlap mask now split open, revealing the hollow darkness beneath. The cat coiled around its ankles, its purr a low, guttural growl, the dust trails now spiraling upward, forming a blue corona around its head. And then the piano note screamed, a single, sustained wail, a sound that wasn't music, wasn't human, that civi unfolded through the hotel's walls like a living thing. The locket's beetle screamed with it, its wings a blur of static, the amber light flaring white-hot. The symbols on the walls Timofit rearranging themselves into a single, repeating glyph, a parasite, burrowing into the stone into feet in me. The foyer's doors sealed themselves shut. The vacuum's hum cut out. Silence. And then the higher note played again. The scream still resonated, a phantom limb throbbing in my skull. The silence that followed was worse, a vacuum itself, pressing against my eardrums. The air tasted of ozone and something like burnt sugar, the scent clinging to the back of my throat, like a physical weight. Molten iron light bled from the scarecrow pooling at its feet, reflecting in the cat's disproportionately large paws. It hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, hadn't ceased to be unsettling. The stone beneath my boots felt wrong, too yielding, too warm. A tremor ran through the foyer, a subtle shift in the architecture that I felt more than heard. The locket pulsed against my sternum, the beetle's wings a frantic blur, mirroring the chaos blooming across my skin. Digital artifacts, jagged lines of black and silver crawled across my arms, mimicking the patterns of the symbols that had writhed on the duct walls. They weren't wounds, not exactly, more like a projection. A map, then. A voice, not a whisper this time. Clear, resonant, amplified. My mother's voice, flat, hollow, yet undeniably verdwined. You're part of the infestation. The words landed like physical blows, each syllable a shard of ice against my ribs. I tried to deny it, to find a rational explanation, hallucination, stress, the lingering effects of whatever twin they had been saying in the duct. But the evidence pressed in on me, a suffocating weight, the digital veins blooming across my skin, the tremors in the floor, the way the air itself seemed to breathe. The cat's purr began to build, a low, guttural rumble that resonated in my bones, syncing with the locket's vibration. It wasn't a comforting sound, it was a tuning fork, amplifying something dreadful. The piano note stuttered, fractured, then reassembled itself, higher now, sharper, a sustained agonizing tone that seemed to unravel the very fabric of my perception. Each pulse of the dying star felt like a hammer blow to my skull. My sense of time fractured, seconds stretched into eternities, then collapsed into fleeting moments. I stumbled back, the molten iron light reflecting in my wide, unfocused eyes. The symbols on the walls, the equations, the constellations reformed, coalescing into a single, repeating glyph. It wasn't a language I recognized yet somehow. I understood. It wasn't a message. It was a free design. A blueprint. The realization hit me with the force of a physical impact. Humanity. Our mental illnesses, the schizophrenia, the depression, the paranoia, weren't flaws. They were symptoms, suicide effects. The inevitable consequence of a parasitic growth. We weren't the apex predators. We were the infestation. The cat's purr intensified, merging with the piano note into a single, sustained dissonance that vibrated through the very marrow of my bones. It was a chorus of suffering, a symphony of decay. I felt a sickening lurch in my stomach, a visceral rejection of everything I thought I knew. The memories, the relationships, the aspirations, all meaningless. All secondary. My skin rippled again, the digital wounds deepening, spreading. I could feel something twine growing beneath the surface, something alien, something other. The locket pulsed. The beetle's wings a frantic blur, the amber light flaring white-hot. The hotel itself seemed to shift, the obsidian walls shimmering, revealing glimpses of something beneath, a network of pulsing veins, a labyrinth of organic tunnels. The scarecrow remained motionless, its burlap mask split open, revealing the hollow darkness beneath. It was no longer a scarecrow. It was a conduit, a manifestation, an extension of the Fufingdi that had built this place. Then it moved slowly. Deliberately, the scarecrow extended a hand, not a hand of straw and burlap, a hand of molten iron, the same material as the hotel's walls, the same material as the pulsing veins beneath the obsidian. The metal was warm, almost searing, radiating an unsettling heat. It moved toward me, inexorably, a silent invitation. The molten iron hand lingered suspended inches from my face. The heat radiated outward, a tangible pressure against my skin. I didn't recoil. I couldn't. The logic circuits in my brain, what remained of them, seemed to have short-circuited, leaving me adrift in a sea of unsettling certainty. The design, the blueprint. Humanity as infestation. It resonated with a horrifying clarity. The tremor in the floor intensified, not a subtle shift this time, but a deep, guttural groan from the foundations of the hotel. The obsidian walls shimmered, the glimpses of the organic network beneath becoming more frequent, more defined. They weren't veins, I realized, but roots, thick, pulsing roots anchoring the hotel to something else. The scent of burnt sugar intensified, mingling with a metallic tang that coated my tongue. Then the piano note vanished, not faded, not diminished, but simply trigonal. The sudden silence was a physical blow, a vacuum sucking the air from my lungs. It was replaced by a new sound, a low, persistent hum, like an antique vacuum cleaner struggling to draw in air. It vibrated through the floor, through my bones, a subtle tremor that resonated with the locket against my sternum. The beetle within pulsed, its wings a frantic blur of amber light now tinged with the cold blue of distant stars. The scarecrow retracted its hand. The molten iron receded into its form, the burlap mask seeming to settle deeper into its face. The room shifted. The foyer dissolved, the grand staircase vanishing into a swirling vortex of gray and iron. I stumbled forward, not falling but propelled by an unseen force. I emerged into a cavernous chamber. The air was cold, dry, and tasted of ozone. Above, the ceiling stretched into an impossible darkness, punctuated by a breathtaking display of holographic stars. They weren't static projections. They moved, tummed, swirling and shifting in a complex, mesmerizing dance. Time itself seemed to warp and bend. Seconds stretched into agonizing eternities, then collapsed into fleeting moments. The failing star's pulse felt like a physical hammer against my skull, dictating the rhythm of my perception. The walls were stone gray, smooth and cold to the touch. They weren't walls, I realized, but screens. They displayed holographic projections, not of stars, but of Sindhi people Shudi, my ancestors. Each face was etched with the same vacant stare, the same haunted despair that I saw reflected in my own eyes. They were all suffering. The same symptoms, the same illness. The vacuum hum grew louder, a constant, oppressive drone. It seemed to emanate from the projections themselves. I recognized faces. My grandfather, his eyes wide with terror. My great-grandmother muttering incoherently. My mother, her expression a mask of chilling detachment. The memories flooded back, distorted and fragmented, but undeniably Fufidi there. The hospital visits. The medication, the hushed conversations. The locket pulsed, the starlight within intensifying, illuminating the holographic projections with an eerie glow. The beetle beat its wings, a frantic counterpoint to the vacuum's hum. I understood then. It wasn't a mental illness, it was assimilation, a slow, insidious integration into something alien. My family hadn't been broken. They'd been absorbed. The holograms began to shift, their movements becoming more synchronized, more deliberate. They turned. All of them, hundreds of faces, all fixed on me, their eyes, vacant moments before, now burned with a chilling intelligence. The vacuum hum peaked, then abruptly ceased. A new sound filled the chamber, the cracking of ice, spreading outwards from an unseen source. Then, a voice, not my mother's this time. A chorus, 1,000 voices whispering in unison, a distorted echo of my mother's words laced with a chilling amusement. "You're part of the infestation." The holograms leaned forward, their faces mere inches from mine. The cracking of ice grew louder, closer. The holograms lunged. Not as bodies, not as flesh, but as shards of static given form. Hundreds of hands, all reaching, all dissolving into molten iron before they could touch. The air screamed with it, a sound like 1,000 nails dragged across glass, the scent of burnt sugar clogging my throat. I recoiled, but the walls themselves seemed to press inward, the stone, grey screens flickering as the alien vines beneath cracked free, their blackened veins oozing a thick syrupy fluid that hissed where it touched the floor. The journal, to my journal, was wedged in the seam of a splitting wall, its pages yellowed but legible, the ink bleeding like sweat. Asterisk. We became the infestation. Asterisk, the first line read, the words jagged as the edges of the cracks forming in the ceiling. The vacuum hum surged, a physical force, and the holograms swin-twisted died, their faces stretching into grotesque parodies of human expressions. My mother's mouth splitting too wide, my grandfather's eyes bulging like grapes. The digital artifacts of their deaths rendered in sickly molten detail. I grabbed the journal, the pages brittle under my fingers. The vines writhed, their tips sharp as knives, and the walls breathed expanding, contracting in time with the dying star. Pulse, a rhythm that hammered against my ribs. The holograms turned in unison, their voices a chorus of static and screaming. Asterisk, you, part of the infestation. Asterisk, the words slithered into my skull, and I felt it. The way the hotel had absorbed my mother, my grandfather. The way the beetle in the locket had known before I did. The locket burned against my chest, the starlight within flickering like a dying bulb, and the cat appeared at the edge of my vision, its massive paws leaving trails of dust that coiled into a path, toward the exit. But the exit was a door. Room 314. The hinges groaned as the door sealed itself shut behind me, the lock clicking with finality. The cat padded forward, its fur brushing my ankle, and the dust trails reformed. This time leading down into the darkness beneath the floorboards. The vacuum hum faded to a whisper, replaced by the wet thufuchi of the vines parting, the fruity creak of the hotel settling into something older. Something hungrier. The journal's last entry glowed in my hands, the ink pulsing like a heartbeat. Asterisk. We didn't choose this, it chose us. Asterisk, the holograms. Fingers brushed the glass. Molten iron dripped from their tips, the locket adhered to my palm. A molten brand. It wasn't a burn, not precisely. More like a resonance, a sympathetic vibration that clawed its way up my arm, settling in my skull. The cat's purr deepened, a guttural rumble that vibrated through the floorboards, through the soles of my boots, and into the marrow of my bones. It wasn't a pleasant vibration, it was a foot pressure. The piano note, that single dissonant tone warped, bending itself around the cat's purr, creating a sonic maelstrom that threatened to shatter my teeth. It was a physical thing now. This sound, a tangible force pushing against my eardrums. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing against the assault. My grandfather's voice, a dry rasp like leaves skittering across pavement, slithered into my mind. Asterisk, they, re-watching. Owen, always watching. Asterisk, I hadn't heard that voice in years, not since the treatments. It was a phantom limb of memory, agonizingly real. My mother's scream followed. High, pitched and fractured, echoing within the confines of my skull. It wasn't a scream of terror, but of understanding. A chilling comprehension of something I could grasp. The scent of molten iron intensified, choking me, coating my tongue with the metallic tang of blood and decay. The dust trails left by the cat's paws thickened, swirling around my ankles like tendrils, tightening their grip. Each pawful was a tremor, a pulse of amplified vibration. I tried to pull the locket free, but it was fused to my skin, the starlight within pulsing with a sickly accelerated rhythm. The cat pressed closer, its disproportionately large paws kneading into my flesh, each press sending a jolt of nausea through me. The vibration coalesced, the purr and the piano note merging into a single, unbearable hum. My vision blurred. The stone, grey walls of room 314 dissolving into a swirling vortex of molten iron. Then I saw it. Not in the room. Not exactly. It was 5 parts of the room. An absence of light, a void woven into the very fabric of the hotel, as architecture, a tall, faceless entity, its form shifting and indistinct, like heat rising from asphalt. It wasn't T30, and yet it was seen. It was the hotel itself, distilled into a single horrifying presence. The digital artifacts, the mocking echoes of my family, descent, intensified, layering over the entity's form, twisting its facelessness into a grotesque parody of humanity. The realization slammed into me with the force of a physical blow, my isolation. The years spent meticulously cultivating my solitude, my beekeeping, my carefully constructed routine. It wasn't a choice. It was a process, an assimilation. The hotel hadn't merely absorbed my mother, my grandfather. It had been cultivating me, nurturing me, preparing me. The cat's purr reached a fever pitch, a throbbing pulse that resonated with the dying star, a erratic rhythm. The locket burned, not with heat, but with a cold, alien energy. The walls pulsed, the stone, grey surfaces rippling like water. My own memories, my own thoughts, felt distant. Like watching a play performed by someone else. Someone who looked like me. The entity's shadow stretched across the room, consuming the light, swallowing the space between me and the far wall. And within that shadow, within that void, I saw it, my own face, distorted, fragmented, but undeniably mine. A reflection not of who I was, but of who I was becoming Tweedy. A face molded by the hotel, by the entity, by the insidious, parasitic inheritance of generations. The piano note became a scream. The cat's purr, a final, triumphant roar. The entity's shadow fully encompassed me. I ran, not thinking, just running. The locket a frozen brand against my palm as I slammed into the corridor wall. The hallway stretched impossibly long. The stone, grey paint peeling like dead skin, molten iron scent thick enough to choke on. My boots slapped the floorboards. For thud, food, 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 food. Each step a hammer blow against the dissonant piano note that had been grinding inside my skull for hours. It wasn't music anymore. It was a physical thing, a metallic scream vibrating through my bones, rattling my teeth. Thud, 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 thud. The sound of my own pulse, amplified, distorted by the hotel. The note reached a fever pitch, a single sustained shriek that made the air itself shudder. I pressed my palms flat against the wall, feeling the stone vibrate, the molten iron hues bleeding into the shadows, turning the corridor into a furnace of grey and searing red. I turned a corner, heart hammering against my ribs. Fin this way, asterisk. The exit sign glowed faintly, a rectangle of sickly green light. Relief, sharp and cold, cut through the dread. I lunged for it, fingers brushing the cold metal of the door handle. Then the corridor 15 benty walls flowed like liquid shadow, the exit vanishing, the stone, grey surfaces rippling like water. Room 314 stood before me, the door slightly ajar, spilling the same molten iron light. My breath hitched. Asterisk number, not again. Asterisk. I spun, sprinting back the way I came, but the corridor was empty, stretching into darkness. Only the piano note remained, a constant, grinding scrape against my eardrums. Room 314. The bed stood in the center, the porcelain doll perched on the rumpled sheets. Its head tilted, mirroring my own frantic turn. Exactly the doll. The doll's glass eyes, cold, empty, reflected the molten iron glow. I stumbled toward it, locket burning cold, the beetle inside its tiny shell beating against my skin, a frantic, trapped rhythm. The piano note swelled, a physical pressure pushing me down, crushing my chest. Fudud, fudud, fud, my heart, the hotel, pulse, the beetle, wings, the molten iron scent choked me, coating my tongue with the taste of blood and rust. The doll's head tracked my movement, the porcelain neck cracking with a sound like dry bones snapping. Its tiny arms lifted, mimicking my desperate grasp for the door handle. It's mimicking me. It's learning. Asterisk panic clawed up my throat. I slammed my palm against the bedpost, the stone, grey wood vibrating violently. The dissonant note fetish shattered, not with silence but with a sudden, absolute void. The sound vanished. Not quiet. Nothing. The absence was heavier than the piano note had been. A suffocating blanket pressing down on my eardrums, my lungs. The molten iron hues pulsed. The stone, grey walls dissolving into swirling smoke. The doll sat perfectly still, its glass eyes reflecting the room. Collapsed then, slowly, impossibly, its head turned toward me. Not a tilt. A full, deliberate rotation. The porcelain neck groaned, a sound like ice cracking in deep water. And in its eyes, I saw it. Not my reflection. The alien ecosystem, the preserved ruins of a dead world, the stone, grey structures of the hotel fin-woven into its very fabric, the molten iron rivers flowing through the architecture like blood, the dying star slight, the erratic pulse of the locket, the beetle's frantic wings, all of it was the true form of the hotel, the scarred ancient world we deparasitized. The doll's glass eyes filled with that light, a cold, distant star burning in the void of its pupils. The molten iron light pulsed once, then the room dissolved into the star's final, silent scream. The doll's head turned, its glass eyes now holding the dying star.